All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. We have something a little bit different today. Perhaps we've never really talked about this exact subject, but how we got on this roll about going to some things dealing with ISIS and Boko Haram is that last week I mentioned a group called the Humanity Party, which was trying to be sort of a new up and coming third party in America. They're actually somewhat of a political cult by some critics' standards. But the thing is, they took down a lot of their YouTube videos and pretty much everything, as well as from their religious side, Marvelous Work and a Wonder. That stuff was all taken down. They put up the political uploads again on YouTube, the Humanity Party stuff, and you can watch some of those things. And I caught one, just like now that it's back up, I was like, okay, let's just watch one that I hadn't seen before, which was talking about this little introduction about Boko Haram. Boko Haram is, of course, the kind of militant terrorist group that mostly functions in northern Nigeria. They've been going on for years. Countless deaths have been attributed to them, and as well as the alleged abduction of the Chibok girls years ago. But when we have this group, which is, by all means a terrorist group, why would the Humanity Party be talking about them? What they're saying is that the guys in Boko Haram are going into this. People are being recruited into terrorist organizations because they feel hopeless. They feel bleak. They feel like their life has no purpose. And also, some people are doing this to escape poverty. They don't have the necessities of life, perhaps. And we're dealing with, very specifically Western Africa, Northeast Nigeria, and so on. Maybe there is a genuine case for that. And we're going to kind of expand that discussion a little bit. But when you look at something like that, is that true? Because the discussion that the Humanity Party continued is to say that a different line that we mentioned on a previous upload on this channel that wasn't connected to the Humanity Party at all. If you improve the economic conditions in these places, that these things will go away. That's their claim. We mentioned this recently on like a different upload talking about scamming, not connected to not connected to the Humanity Party at all, excuse me. But is that really what's going to happen? If we improve the economic conditions in these areas, will we get rid of Boko Haram and we get rid of ISIS? That's a bold statement to make, but the thing is, it comes to us from so many circles on the internet, particularly progressive circles. I mean, there are things like commentators such as Michael Brooks, people like Bernie Sanders, politicians, who are much more influential than commentators, that is, as well as other people, like the Humanity Party now. Some group that was trying to become an up-and-coming third party, I mean, their YouTube channel went blank about a week ago, and now they're putting up a few more of their uploads again. I don't really know if they're going to be that influential. I just think they have some interesting things, and they kind of get the gears turning and make you think about stuff. That's why I talk about them. I don't think that they're going to have any profound impact on humanity. Sadly, I should have used a different term. But the thing is, the reason why I'm skeptical of that approach is that I don't know if they're getting to the heart of the issue. That if you just improve the economic conditions in, say, Syria and Iraq and Nigeria, that this terrorism stuff is going to go away. What's very likely is it could morph into a different fashion. Why can't terrorism morph into a secular fashion? I mean, it's like, I don't know if that's really going to eliminate terrorism. It comes across as a statement that is perhaps too bold. And it's almost like people are making kind of unconvincing and unrealistic proposals about how to combat these terrorist threats. The exact plan that the Humanity Party put forward, and to their credit, they did have an exact plan, is they want Americans, start with America first, everyone to have a voucher card that will function like universal basic income, where it's like you can spend it on only certain items, food, clothing, shelter materials, education, and medicine. You can spend it on those things. And they want it to be done worldwide. They're like, if they had this in Nigeria, you wouldn't have terrorists in Boko Haram. And if you had this in Iraq and Syria, you wouldn't have the terrorists as well, because people would have the necessities of life provided for them. And there's even like some talk about this. Was it in Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, about something like give a man food or something and then talk to him about religion or something like that. It's something that's, I forget that exact quote or something like that. It's been a while, but I mean, it's something that people have been talking about. I'm just a little bit skeptical of whether or not it would eliminate terrorism completely, because it's like, one of the things though, I can agree that people would be joining terrorist cells because they feel bleak and they feel like they are hopeless. But you also see people coming from the Western world to join ISIS. People coming from the United Kingdom to join ISIS. Coming from Canada to join Al Qaeda Al Maghreb. People coming from the United States of America to join all sorts of terrorist cells. We have people, in Minnesota funding Al Shabaab in Somalia. These people have a higher standard of living, and the terrorism didn't get eliminated. I mean, even if you're going to have those type of discussions, they're going to be like, okay, economics is not everything. The economic situation isn't everything. It's just the biggest part. Maybe there's a little bit more of a leg to stand on there to say that simply giving people a voucher system that's going to allow them to purchase food and clothing and shelter materials is not everything, but that's a step in the right direction. I'm all for improving quality of life. Who isn't really? I mean, we all want to improve quality of life for everybody, except maybe not some sort of people who want to bring back the monarchy and such, who want to go back to the monarchs and the peasants and the royals and all that. Yes, those people do exist, unfortunately. But the thing is, though, it's like, we got to look at the entire situation, though. Why would somebody leave, a place like California and go across the world and start fighting for ISIS or something like that? And then those guys like Sam Harris was a very, very particular person who would talk about stuff like this. And, he was involved with a couple debates on it with Reza Aslan and Cenk Uygur, and we don't have to get into too much of that stuff, but he was kind of just sort of thinking that maybe there's some bad ideologies in the world. I don't personally think like that. That's his point, not mine. Once again, I don't think like that, but you could just, the statement, the sort of the response is, if somebody is going to be leaving their home country in America or the United Kingdom and go to the Middle East and try to become a warrior for jihad, then they're trying to seek something like glory. They're trying to sort of put themselves into an elevated status. And that's not necessarily going to be eliminated by improving the economic situation in places around the world. Because once again, this is not just Nigeria, and this is not just the Middle East. People are coming from the United Kingdom and America to these places to get involved in the conflict. So that means that just because you have the ability to get food and clothing and a place to live does not mean that you're going to be free from that desire for glory. And how about the lust for power? Is that something that is going to be dissolved by getting the necessities of life provided for you? Power, tyranny, and even oligarchy isn't something that is completely eliminated by providing people with the basic necessities of life. I mean, and this is a very specific plan that we've been discussing, giving, the voucher system like UBI. I mean, the Humanity Party did say that. They want to put this into a worldwide thing, which would include Nigeria, which would include Iraq and Syria. But the thing is, though, I would be much rather curious to know, like, if they've really covered all the bases for something like this. We've had a few discussions about the concept of oligarchy on this channel, and there was that show New Realities that had a bit of a kind of just, debate about the concept of oligarchy and saying that it's the downfall of every single civilization. But just because people have food does not mean that there aren't going to be power dynamics. And there does not mean that there isn't going to be sort of people trying to control things and reserving power only for a few people as opposed to everyone. How would this plan eliminate something like that? Unless you really want to sort of view that, I mean, the Humanity Party does address things in the political system, but first and foremost, though, it's a very, very bold statement to say that you kind of are just going to give people food and clothing and they're going to stop becoming terrorists. I mean, do you think, though, that maybe they think too poorly of humanity? I'm not trying to be silly and be one of those annoying kids in the back of a high school classroom. Oh, yeah, well, maybe they don't care about humanity, huh? Did you ever think about that? I mean, I'm really not trying to make it sound like that, even though I totally just did. But it's like, just to think that humans are so pathetic and that humans are so superficial that if you just give humans food and clothing and medicine, education, shelter, materials, if you just give people that stuff, that there aren't going to be problems in the world, like terrorism, like terrorist cells forming. Because then it'll just be, what happens though when you got to deal with something like who gets to be president? Who gets to be president of your new world? Who gets to be in the government? Who gets to be making the decisions? Oh, wait, not me? Well, hey, let's gather a few people around. Hey, guess what? We've been robbed. We've been cheated. These people are taking all the power for themselves. Let's fight. And that's going to resort to things like terrorism. Eliminating the economic depressions around the world is not going to alleviate terrorism 100%. I mean, and the thing is, though, even if you're going to be like, well, it could really improve things, maybe it can. But the thing that I have issues with when you're dealing with people who are just saying, improve the economic situation and everything will get better is, it's an assumption. It's not a prediction. I mean, to the levels that they're talking about, it's an assumption. Yeah, people around the world have, we've reduced poverty around many places, and there's some of the things that they talk about, like, what was it, the year 2000 to 2012 or is it 2013 that they saw the largest rise from poverty into the middle class worldwide at any point in human history? These things do happen. These things do happen. We have to improve the economic conditions around the world for everybody, but just because that's the way that the world should be, because that's a good thing to do. And there are also some other sort of perspectives on this. I was listening to this one guy, Jason Ross. I used to listen to him a lot. He has videos on YouTube, Jason Ross, but it's like, he was just sort of saying that poverty exists because people let it happen. Poverty exists because there are people at the top who don't want the power dynamic and the sort of resources dynamics and the economic dynamic to change. Poverty could be eliminated if people wanted it to, but it isn't. And, that's going back to the concepts. There are oligarchs who are hogging everything for themselves, and the oligarchs can be financial and they can also be political when dealing with power. But there's even a line about that in Lemony Snicket's Unfortunate Events. I was watching it last year on Netflix, and then one of the characters says, we have to keep the poor people poor. If they weren't poor anymore, who would we have to feel sorry for? And I'm paraphrasing that, but you get the idea. That is definitely sort of an idea that's been expressed all across the board. That, there are people who are very well off, and they're the haves and the have-nots. And in America, if you're American, which many of you are, I know, you see this all the time on the evening news. These constant things, the battles against the 1%, all the way back to Occupy Wall Street. We are the 99%, and they want to target the 1%, and the 1% are responsible for so many things. They're trying to have this war against the type of financial elites that they think they are. But, once again, yeah, we should improve economic conditions around the world. We've talked a lot about universal basic income on this channel. I don't really know if it's going to be affected in my lifetime in America in the way that the candidates describe it. Like the way that Andrew Yang describes universal basic income, $1,000 a month for everybody. I don't know if I'm going to see that in my lifetime. I don't know if I'm going to see the Humanity Party's plan about giving people UBI that can be used on certain items like the necessities of life only on those items. I don't know if I'm going to see that in my lifetime. One thing that I'm quite curious about for the United States of America as opposed to Iraq, Syria, and Nigeria is that when you talk about universal basic income, why do these things have to be implemented nationwide first? Why aren't there more like trial zones in different states when there'd be like, all right, this county in your state, I'm from West Virginia, this county in West Virginia is going to have the universal basic income, and it's like they're going to have a voucher card that they can use to get the basic necessities of life provided for them. And it's just like you see how it works in one county. You might be thinking that, all right, well, that doesn't really help that many people. Or the other thing to say is, yeah, of course, that group of people, that small fraction of the American population would be very well off if they didn't have to pay for everything when everybody else did. Because the biggest argument against universal basic income is inflation. And I'm not talking about the currency, I'm talking about inflation of prices. Like, all the prices are going to go up. All the landlords are going to say, instead of paying $1,000 a month in rent, you now pay $2,000 because we know you have the money. And that's a genuine statement that they're going to have to deal with. And I just think that's an inevitable reality that the universal basic income enthusiasts have not really created a strong plan for. I mean, if there is one out there, maybe I haven't come across it yet, but it's a very tricky situation. But the fact of the matter is, I don't believe we'll necessarily see those things nationwide in my lifetime. Once again, if it were to be implemented in something like at not even the state level, but just sort of a regional level, it might have a certain effect. But that's dealing with people in the United States of America. We're going to be talking about what do we do in Iraq and Syria and Nigeria and Somalia and all these places around the world that are going to be dealing with the problems of ISIS, the hotbeds of terrorism. You know, it's like the last time I was at an airport, they even asked me, have you ever been to Syria? Even though I've never been to Syria. I don't have any Syrian visas in my passport. I've never been close to Syria, but they were asking that because it's a hotbed for terrorism, Iraq and Syria. And it's like, it's just, what do we do about that exact situation? Yes, improving the economic situations in those nations is essential. And one of the real things is they're going to need some leadership that is going to come from the ground up. They're going to need some local leaderships who can really mobilize. I mean, look what Mahatma Gandhi did in India. You know, like, and I know Gandhi wasn't a perfect person. I've read Richard Grenier's articles and such. Yes, he did some bad things as well, but look at what he did in terms of becoming a cultural icon. Nations like Nigeria and Iraq and Syria are going to need that. They don't need people like Saddam Hussein, and they also don't need people like Bashar al-Assad, and Nigeria certainly isn't going to need people like Muhammadu Buhari. They need someone who can go much further than that and actually unify the people, try to just sort of get some people together for the common good, and also leave a lasting impact. Someone once told me this, I at a bar once, about just like, what do we really do about problems like that? And the guy was just saying, a revolution that is fought militarily doesn't really have that much impact. A revolution of thought and consciousness is really what makes the difference once you get people to start thinking in a new way. And the example that he cited was Gandhi, about what Gandhi did in India. And the sort of, Deepak Chopra also really praises Gandhi in India. He says Gandhi overthrew the British Empire, the English and, the British Empire and all that, without firing a single shot. But as we all know, if you look at what happened with Pakistan and Bangladesh, the situation was actually somewhat messy in India. That would be sort of a step forward to reducing the terrorist levels in any nation around the world is. And it's not going to come from some guy like me. Once again, I'm not Syrian. They're going to need some guy from Syria, some guy from Iraq, and some guy from Nigeria that can actually be the effective leader. And maybe that person is waiting to be born. But also, yes, economics is one thing, but it's also culture. And if that can be the penultimate thing that is just going to come down in this episode, it's also something cultural that is going to be necessary to get out of these things like ISIS and out of these things like Boko Haram. And a lot of people entertain the far-out conspiracy theories, which we didn't get into too much, but I don't really want to talk about those right now. I think there might actually be a grain of truth in some of the conspiracy theories associated with ISIS, but we can talk about that in another future upload. Right now, what we're really going to have to say is, if we're going to be having any sort of major political development in any of the nations that we mentioned that have these major hotbeds of terrorism, it's going to happen if they can get a leader that can mobilize the people and get them to start thinking about working together for the common good of their own nations. It's not going to be done by the Western world, and it's not going to be done by somebody like me who doesn't have any connection to the land, or any sort of Joe somebody on the street who has a plan for Syria, a plan for Iraq, and a plan for Nigeria. It's going to be done from somebody on the homeland who actually has the ability to unify. That's all for me now. What do you think about terrorism? What do you think are the main motivations for terrorism? Is it economic, or do you believe that it is cultural? Or do you believe that it is something else, like they're just bad ideologies in the world? What would you have to say about any of this? I would love to hear from you, and until next time.